I still remember that moment as if it were burned into my mind in searing detail. A moment when my world, once filled with trust and quiet routines, shattered into a million painful fragments. It was late one night when my wife claimed she was working late, and I, overcome by a gnawing unease, stepped into the shower only to discover evidence that exposed a truth I never wanted to face. In that steamy, private space, the sight of a stray lipstick mark on the shower wall, the faint scent of unfamiliar perfume lingering in the warm mist, and the remnants of a half-used tube left carelessly on the tile, struck me like a sledgehammer. Every comforting lie evaporated in an instant, leaving me speechless and drowning in betrayal. That single moment, raw, unfiltered, and brutally real, became the beginning of a journey that would forever alter my life. I had always prided myself on the predictable, steady life we built together. My wife, Lisa, and I had shared years of quiet mornings over coffee, simple dinners, and long, lazy weekends where our love was measured in shared glances and whispered promises. We lived in a modest home that was our sanctuary, a place that, to the outside world, seemed filled with contentment and mutual respect. I believed our relationship was built on honesty and trust, qualities that I thought were unbreakable. Yet, in the months leading up to that fateful night, there had been subtle signs that something was amiss. Lisa began to work later than usual, often coming home with an air of distraction and a mysterious gleam in her eyes that I couldn't quite decipher. I tried to dismiss my mounting suspicions as nothing more than the natural ebb and flow of a busy career, but deep down, a small seed of doubt had taken root. It was a typical Thursday evening when everything changed. Lisa had insisted she needed to stay late at the office to finish an urgent project. I watched her leave with a kiss on my cheek, her smile tinged with an excitement I hadn't seen in years. Alone in the quiet of our home, I busied myself with dinner, yet my mind was restless, tormented by nagging thoughts that I dared not voice. The minutes turned into hours, and as the clock in the living room ticked steadily, I felt the oppressive weight of uncertainty pressing in on me. Unable to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, I decided to take a shower, a mundane act that, on that night, would expose the truth in the most devastating way. As I stepped into the warm cascade of water, the steam enveloped me like a cocoon, and for a moment, I allowed the soothing heat to wash away my worries. I closed my eyes, trying to forget the gnawing anxiety that had haunted me all evening. But as I reached for my towel and stepped out, I noticed something that made my heart stop: a small, unmistakable smear of lipstick on the cool tile of our shower floor. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a mere distortion caused by the steam. But as I leaned closer, the truth struck me with brutal clarity: that wasn't my wife's lipstick. It was a bold, unfamiliar shade, something I had never seen on her lips before. For a few agonizing seconds, I stood frozen under the dim light, my body still damp with the water's residue as the shock coursed through me. Every memory, every whispered conversation about working late, all came crashing down with a force that left me gasping. I felt betrayed, exposed, and utterly alone. The gentle hum of the water, which should have been a comfort, now underscored the stark reality of the lie. I felt a mix of anger and profound sadness well up inside me. My mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? Who was this other person? And most crushing of all, why had she felt the need to hide the truth behind a facade of work? In that moment of unbearable clarity, I grabbed the lipstick stain with trembling hands, almost as if I needed to physically confirm the betrayal, and then sat down on the cold, hard floor of the bathroom. I wrapped the stain in a tissue and stared at it as if it held the answers to all my questions. Every detail, the color, the shape, the faint smell, was etched into my memory. It was no longer a simple piece of cosmetic. It was the damning evidence of a secret life that I had never suspected, a proof that shattered the fragile trust that had once sustained us. My heart pounded as I realized the enormity of what I had discovered. The evidence in that shower was irrefutable. I felt as if the ground had been pulled out from beneath me, and I was left teetering on the edge of an abyss filled with betrayal and despair. My mind flashed back to the late nights when Lisa had been working late, to the soft excuses and the hurried texts I had dismissed as nothing more than the demands of a busy job. Now, every lie seemed to crystallize into a single, undeniable truth: I had been living a false sense of security. After that dreadful moment, I knew I could not stay in denial any longer. With the lipstick tube and stain clutched tightly in my hand, I made a decision that would irrevocably alter the course of my life. I needed to confront Lisa, to force a truth that could no longer be hidden behind excuses and lies. I couldn't bear the thought of spending another day in a home built on deception. I stood up, my body shaking with a mixture of fury and sorrow, and resolved that when she returned, I would face her with the evidence. Time passed slowly that night. I sat alone in our silent living room, the dim light from a single lamp flickering on the walls, casting long, distorted shadows. Every sound, the ticking of the clock, the distant hum of traffic, felt amplified in the heavy quiet of our home. I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions, questioning everything about our relationship. I had loved her deeply, and yet, her betrayal made me feel as though everything I had once believed in was nothing but an illusion. The warmth of our past, the shared dreams, the simple moments of joy, they were now tainted by the bitter taste of deceit. I began to wonder how I would confront her. Would I be able to keep my voice steady as I revealed the proof of her infidelity? Could I face the person who had once been my partner, my confidant, and tell her that our life was built on lies? The thought filled me with dread, but I knew that I couldn't avoid it any longer. The evidence in my hand was as clear as daylight, and it demanded to be acknowledged. As the night deepened, I paced the floor of our bedroom, my mind a tempest of memories and regrets. I remembered the soft way she used to hold my hand, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke of our future, and the quiet security of our home, a home I now felt like a stranger in. Every comforting memory was a stark contrast to the harsh reality I now faced. I realized that everything had changed irrevocably in that moment. I had lost not just her trust, but the illusion of the life we had built together. The next morning, as I awaited her return, I felt a numb mixture of anticipation and dread. I had cleaned up the evidence as best as I could, but the stain on my memory would remain indelible. I was determined to confront her, to force her to explain the betrayal, even if it meant shattering the remnants of the love we once shared. When the front door finally clicked open and Lisa stepped in, I was waiting for her in the hallway, my face pale and my eyes hard with a mixture of sorrow and anger. The look on her face as she saw me, hesitant, confused and terrified, was almost worse than the betrayal itself. For a long, silent moment we stood there, the tension between us palpable. I held up the evidence, not as a weapon, but as a silent demand for the truth. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper but carrying all the weight of the heartbreak I felt. Her eyes widened and I saw the color drain from her face. For a moment, there was only silence, a void filled with the unspoken truth of her actions. Then, in a voice choked with emotion, she began to speak. She confessed, through broken words and trembling apologies, that she had indeed been unfaithful. The details spilled out slowly, a story of loneliness, a yearning for excitement, and the gradual erosion of a love that had once seemed so invincible. I listened, my heart shattering with every word as the truth I had feared unfolded before me. In that painful exchange, I realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The trust that had taken years to build was now irrevocably broken. I could feel the cold weight of regret settling over me, a reminder that every word, every gesture had led us to this moment. And yet, even in the midst of betrayal, I felt a strange, hollow relief, a final, bitter acknowledgement that I had been living a lie. I was left with no choice but to accept that the woman I loved had chosen a different path, one that left me alone with the ruins of our shattered dreams. That day marked a turning point, a moment when I understood that I could no longer cling to a past that was built on false promises. I had to choose between wallowing in the despair of betrayal or taking a drastic turn toward reclaiming my own identity. As I looked at her, at the woman who had once been my everything, I realized that I was no longer responsible for her choices, no longer bound to the illusions of a marriage that had been destroyed by deceit. In that heart-wrenching moment, I vowed to forge a new path for myself, one that would lead me away from the darkness of the past and toward a future where my self-worth was no longer defined by her infidelity. I left that confrontation with a heavy heart, the taste of betrayal still bitter on my tongue, but with a determined glint in my eye. I knew that the road ahead would be long and fraught with painful memories, but I also knew that I had to start rebuilding, not for her, not for the remnants of what we had once shared, but for me. I began by changing the small details of my life, the daily routines that had once defined me. I took long walks at dawn, returned to hobbies I had abandoned, and gradually I began to piece together a life that was truly my own. In the solitude of those early days, I found myself writing extensively in my journal. I poured out every raw emotion, every doubt, and every glimmer of hope. My words became a roadmap for the journey ahead, a guide that reminded me that even in the depths of despair, there is the possibility of renewal. I reflected on the lessons learned from our relationship, acknowledging that love, when tainted by betrayal, must be re-examined and sometimes let go. I wrote of the necessity of reclaiming oneself, of forging an identity that is independent of another's actions, and of the slow, painstaking process of healing that I knew lay ahead. Every day I took one step at a time. I sought the support of friends, listened to their advice, and slowly allowed myself to accept that my heart was still capable of healing. I began to see that while the betrayal would always be a part of my story, it did not have to be the final chapter. I could learn to forgive, not just my wife but also myself, for the mistakes that led us here. In that quiet acceptance, I discovered a newfound strength that I had never known before. As the weeks turned into months, I saw subtle changes in both my inner world and my surroundings. The echo of that painful night gradually receded into the background of my life, replaced by the steady rhythm of healing and growth. I started to engage with the world again, attending gatherings, reconnecting with colleagues, even considering the possibility of new relationships. I realized that life does not stop at betrayal, it moves forward, often carrying us to unexpected places of beauty and self-discovery. One crisp morning as I walked through the park near my home, I saw the world bathed in the gentle light of dawn. The birds sang, the leaves rustled softly in the breeze, and for a moment, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't known in months. I paused and reflected on the journey so far, the pain, the betrayal, the loss, and the slow, resilient march toward reclaiming my identity. In that quiet moment, I vowed that I would no longer let the shadow of that terrible night dictate the rest of my life. I would rebuild, step by step, until I was no longer defined by the betrayal that had once shattered me. Now, as I sit at my desk, pen in hand, writing the next chapter of my story, I feel a cautious hope stirring within me. I know that the road ahead is long and that there will be moments when the past resurfaces with a vengeance. But I also know that I have grown, that I have learned, and that every scar is a reminder of the strength I have gained. I have learned that true healing comes not from forgetting the past, but from embracing it as a part of who I am and using it to build a future that is richer, deeper, and more authentic. I am not the same man I was on that painful night, nor am I the man I once thought I would be. I have been remade by the fires of betrayal and have emerged, battered yet unbowed, with a quiet determination to live a life true to myself. I have learned that the end of one chapter is merely the beginning of another, a chance to rediscover the person within and to reclaim my own destiny. I no longer see my wife's betrayal as the final word in my story, rather, it is a turning point, a painful but necessary catalyst for growth. As I close my journal for the night, I feel the weight of the past slowly lifting, replaced by a deep-seated belief that I can and will rebuild my life. I have taken the first steps on a long road to redemption, a road paved with small victories, honest reflections, and the unyielding resolve to be better than I was before. I choose to see every moment of pain as an opportunity to learn, every scar as a mark of survival, and every day as a chance to reclaim the dignity that betrayal once tried to steal. Though I know the journey ahead will be fraught with challenges, I am ready to face them, armed with the lessons of the past and the hope of a new dawn. I have learned that in the midst of heartache, there is the power to transform, to rebuild, and to rise again. My story, though marred by betrayal, is also a story of resilience, a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit.